The vehicle and the subject of today's walk around video is a vehicle that all of us Jeep fans were expecting Jeep to eventually build. They debuted one at Easter Jeep Safari right after they debuted the original Gladiator, and it literally broke the internet. Everyone was so excited to see it, but they just never built it. And as years went by, I got tired of waiting for them to build it, so I built one of my own. And of course, what I'm talking about is my two-door Jeep Gladiator. The reason I built this Jeep is, just as I said, I was waiting for Jeep to build a two-door Gladiator and they never did. I understand why they didn't though. I mean, when you talk to the people at Jeep as to why they build specific models, all of us in the Jeep world will say, man, I wish I could just get a stripped down JL with no bells and whistles, manual transmission, big motor, all of these things that I want. And they did build that Jeep and nobody bought it. Everybody ended up buying the Rubicon with a full leather interior and the fancy gauges. And what you think you want and what you want when you're shopping for a brand new car are two different things. And although you might think that you want a two-door pickup truck, you know, I think sales numbers show if you were to compare just two-door pickup trucks in general versus crew cabs and quad cabs, I don't think very many people are actually buying two-door pickup trucks. So I don't blame them for not building the Jeep. I do think it's a super cool Jeep, and that is one of the reasons why I want one. Now, in my defense, I've kind of got this sickness for really liking two-door short bed pickup trucks. I think at this point in time, I own like 5 or 6 of them, and I think they make great off-road vehicles. So I knew that the plan to build this two-door Gladiator was going to be an awesome vehicle, and I would absolutely love it. So I built it on my television show four-wheeler, and the vehicle actually started life as a 4-door Jeep JK, a 2007 that I bought from an online insurance auction website. Now, my original plan was to take a 2-door Jeep JK and cut it up and build all the stuff custom. But then I got a text message from the guys at Great Tops, and I'd done stuff with them in the past. That's who made the top for my shop truck project. And he showed me a new prototype that he was working on that basically you cut the Jeep 4-door JK, you cut it in half right in the middle of the rear door, and he was creating a bulkhead that would basically bolt in place and turn the 4-door JK into a pickup truck. And I thought, that's exactly what I need. So I got that kit from him and it was perfect. It literally went in like 4 hours. So drove the Jeep into the shop, prepped it for where I needed to cut it, cut the body, cut the cage, flipped it out of the way, and boom, before you know it, literally in 4 hours with the bed, with the rear cap in place, I had a pickup truck. Now, it wasn't a Gladiator yet. I originally had thought about trying to find a bed for the Gladiator and just buying it straight from Jeep, because when I built the Jeep, the Gladiator was still pretty new. And so they weren't showing up in junkyards quite yet. But I was just cruising through Facebook Marketplace one day and I saw a Gladiator tailgate for sale. And I'd been searching for the tailgate because I knew that if I bought the bed from Jeep, it wasn't going to come with a tailgate. So I had been basically looking for guys who were selling tailgates, and they're incredibly expensive for the Gladiators. I think they were selling for like $1,500 if you got them complete with the handles and the latches and everything. This was a picture of a Gladiator tailgate, but it was still attached to a bed. So I called the wrecking yard and asked if I could buy the bed, and they said they couldn't sell it because there was damage to the left front corner, which I didn't care about because I knew I was going to have to stretch this bed forward to make the proportions work on my project. I drove out, took a look at it, and it was perfect. We worked at a deal that if I bought the tailgate, gave them a little bit extra money, they'd throw in the bed, and it was ideal. That basically sold this truck as the two-door Jeep Gladiator. When I originally built it, there were only two-door Jeep Gladiators in the country. There was the one that Jeep had built, and then there was mine. And that was awesome to have a one-of-a-kind two-door Jeep Gladiator. Some cool features of the Jeep, it's not really a Gladiator, but I did a lot of stuff to basically try to sell that story of it. So it's got a Fiberworks JK to JL conversion front grille, so the front grille looks like a JL, which is similar to a Gladiator. The bed, I had to stretch it in the front to make the proportions work with the wheelbase on a two-door. So what I ended up doing is adding about 14 to 16 inches to the front of the Gladiator bed, just in sheet metal. And then while I was doing it, I realized this would be a perfect spot for a toolbox. So I built an integrated toolbox into the front of the bed. Then I can still use all regular Gladiator bed accessories on the back. So I have an actual Gladiator tonneau cover on the back that would just fit any normal Gladiator. It just is a little bit short and goes right up to the lid for the toolbox that I built integrated into the front of the bed. Specs on the two-door Gladiator are, okay, so from the front to the back, it's sitting on a stock four-door JKU frame, so it's a wheelbase of 116 inches. It's got 37-inch tall tires all the way around on 17-inch wheels. The rear is a semi-float Dana 60. The front is the Jeep JK Rubicon Dana 44. It's been heavily modified with aftermarket locker, axle shafts, knuckles, everything you could throw at that front axle, I did. Underneath the hood is a 5.3 liter LS running off an RPM Extreme harness, so it integrates into the Jeep seamlessly. Behind that, 4L80, and then the non-Rubicon transfer case, so it's a 2.72:1 low range ratio. The color is I think it's called Desert Tan. The hood has an aftermarket hood on it. It's got a Next Venture Motorsports frame chop front bumper, Next Venture Motorsports skids, RPM steering and suspension, and it's their throwdown kit. So it's got the 2.5-inch aluminum links with a double triangulated 4-link in the back, 3-link in the front. Right now it's sitting on metal coils, which I'm going to leave it on, and I'm waiting on some Baller Radflow internal bypass shocks that will go on it before it goes to Easter Jeep Safari. Interior, it's pretty much stock JK, except I do have a Stinger head unit to basically try to make it look a little bit newer, have that big screen in there, which I absolutely love. Out back, Gladiator bed, all stock except for that stretch in the front where the toolbox is, and then a Next Venture Motorsports aluminum bumper on the back. I still need to add some more off-road lights, which I'll do when I prep it to get ready for Easter Jeep Safari. Some funny stories about this Jeep is that I originally was building it for myself just to be as a daily driver, and I didn't want to be a hardcore rock crawler, so I didn't throw a whole bunch of off-roady parts at it right out of the gate. And then my son was home for the summer, and he was going to school at the time at the University of Arizona in Tucson, and he took his BMW a couple times, and it just was not the right car for him to have at school. It was breaking down a lot. So I gave it to him to take to school. So he had it for his last couple of years of university, and he loved it. It was a great truck to have in Arizona. The funny thing is, when I painted it, so I went shopping for paint, and I knew I just wanted it like a tan color, nothing fancy. So I honestly went into Google and typed cheap tan paint. And I found this industrial tan paint, and I bought literally everything. I bought the paint, the reducer, the activator. It's a single stage paint. Paint, reducer, activator, sealer, 2 paint suits, a roll of 36-inch masking paper, and some paint strainers. I think it was $350 for all of the materials for this paint job, which if you are in the automotive collision world, you know that's insane. Normally it would be at least $3,000 worth of paint to paint a vehicle. And I took it over to my buddy Kevin Tates, who him and I have been friends since we were on Power Block together. And he said he would paint it for me if I went over and helped him. So I went over and prepped it, sanded everything down. He finished some of the body work that was a little rough on the bed, which I appreciate because I'm not really good at body work. And then he painted it. And when he heard it was going to Arizona, he said, "That's fine, but that paint, it's going to fade. That's just a single stage paint. It's a cheap paint. It's not a good paint." He said, "It's not going to last in the Arizona sun. It's going to fade out super fast." And I said, "That's fine," because originally I'd wanted flat tan paint, but that was an extra $200. So I bought the high gloss tan paint because it was cheaper. And it was in Arizona for 2 years, and the paint looks just as good as the day Kevin sprayed it. Every time he sees the Jeep, he's shocked that the paint is still in such good shape. So much so that he had a job that he had to paint another person's off-road vehicle for them. And normally he would just use really good paint, but he said, "No, we're not doing that. I'm gonna go find where Ian bought this super cheap paint. We're gonna paint the truck the same way," which is what he did. And I thought it was awesome. So sometimes cheap paint for the win, you know, it can always pay off in the long term. Couple more funny stories. So my son had it at school. He was constantly hounded by people who'd seen it on the show, couldn't figure out why it was in Arizona because they knew we didn't shoot the show in Arizona. People would follow him into restaurants and bars, and if he was at the school, they'd basically follow him to class, find out where he got the Jeep, how did he get the Jeep, and he would basically have to say, well, my dad built it. Or if they didn't know it from the show, they'd want to know how the world he got a two-door Jeep Gladiator because they were trying to buy one, and they couldn't. One guy actually stopped him once and said, hey, I didn't know they made those in two-door. I went to the dealer, showed them pictures of yours, and they said that they couldn't order it. They wanted to know where you got it from, which was kind of funny because that tells me that we were able to sell it from 50 feet away, that it was actually a two-door Gladiator, which is great. I think it's perfect because that was the plan all along. Things I would change about the truck. Well, the truck's actually morphed over the few years that I've had it. When I first built it, I left the stock V6 in it, and that's what my son took to college for 2 years. And then when he came home, I ended up doing an LS swap. So now it has an LS underneath the hood. So it's got a 5.3 with a 4L80 behind that. I had originally built a couple of axles for it, but I knew once I got a hold of it, I was probably going to take it four-wheeling. So I started to upgrade it. So now it has a semi-float 60 in the rear. And I just got done building a pretty bomb-proof front Dana 44 because we're getting ready to take it to Easter Jeep for Easter Jeep Safari. It's never been to Easter Jeep Safari, and I try to take a different vehicle every now and then, every few years when I go, just to shake it up a little bit. Right now, the vehicle just keeps changing. I think now it's at a point where I'm just going to stop. Now it has a full RPM Extreme double triangulated 4-link kit in the back, 3-link kit in the front. I'm waiting on some shocks from Radflow to put together, and it should be a pretty baller setup. So I'm excited to see how well it works in the dirt at this year's EJS. One thing I probably would change about the truck, if I was going to build it from scratch again, I would change how the bed was laid out. A lot of guys bob the beds on the Gladiator, and I think it looks really good. I would have done that to this Gladiator, but that's where I would have stolen the length I needed for the front. I think if I'd bobbed the bed on the back, so basically taken a chunk out from between the rear axle and the taillights and moved that to in front of the rear axle and the cab, I think the proportions would have still worked. The bed would have been a little bit shorter, would have been a better departure angle when you're on the trail, and I think it would have just really sold that short bed look. I think right now it kind of looks like a two-door sort of medium bed length truck, and I really would have liked the short bed, to be honest with you. Cost to build this truck, you know, I've never added it up, but I would say probably to the point where it's at right now with everything I've done to it. So we're talking about buying a four-door JK, cutting it up, getting a Gladiator bed, and then doing the throwdown hardcore off-road suspension, the LS underneath the hood, a couple of bomb-proof axles. I mean, there's every bit of $50,000 in that truck right now, which is okay in my opinion because I built it to basically be a two-door Gladiator. And if I was to go out tomorrow and buy a Jeep Gladiator, I'd have to spend $50,000 on it. And then I'd have to throw a bunch of parts at it because that would just be a stock Gladiator. I'd still want axles and tires and wheels and a lift kit and probably even some type of power adder or maybe a Hemi underneath the hood. So I think sticking with the two-door Gladiator at 50 grand, I honestly think it's a good deal. At this point now, there are actually multiple versions of two-door Gladiators out there. Jeep still has theirs. I have mine. My good friend Greg Henderson built an amazing one for Quadratec, debuted it at SEMA a couple years ago. It's probably a little bit better. Obviously, it's better than mine. It's not a little bit. It's a lot better than mine because he started with an actual JL. He actually started with the hybrid version of the Jeep, which is super cool. So it's got that hybrid powertrain in it, and then he turned it into a two-door Gladiator, which I thought was super, super cool. And I think he actually bobbed the bed and messed around with the proportions a little bit. So his looks really, really good. I've seen it in person, and it's amazing work. Greg does awesome work. And then there's a few other people. Now that the Gladiator beds are sort of popping up online a little bit cheaper. And that's all because companies like Motobuilt are selling bed replacements for the Jeep. And so now you can get these Gladiator beds used for $2,000, $3,000 complete, which is a pretty good deal. So all in all, if you want to build a two-door Jeep Gladiator, I would encourage you to do it. I'm super happy with mine. And if there's a vehicle that a manufacturer isn't building, there's nothing wrong with just building one yourself.